this presentation we'll be looking at ARLegend and how it can assist you in creating door schedules, window schedules, furniture schedules. So you can see here we've got a door schedule that's been created using the ARLegend command. Some things worth noting are that all of the items have been spaced automatically on the sheet. So we've said what size sheet we have and the items have been placed automatically. Items have also had dimensions added to them, as well as information that we've chosen to report on. So here we've got the family name, the type, the width, the height, and in this case we've also chosen to report on all the door marks as they appear in our plans. So you can set whichever parameters you want to have reported on. Let's just have a quick look at the ARLegend interface. So there's a number of sections to the dialog. So the first part actually relates to a control file. This file contains all of the definitions of how we'd typically like our legends or schedules created. So it makes it easy for us to pick a doors template or a walls template. So we can define multiple standard legends that we want to use. We can also define what the contents of those legends are. So there's a view that will be used to generate the legend. What category are we using in that legend? And we can specify how we want items sorted, what parameters we want reported on, and we can also elect to filter the legend so that we only get the items that we're interested in. And finally down here we can specify information about how big our page is, so that we can make certain that when our legend is created we can actually fit it onto the appropriate size sheet. We can say what sort of gap we want in the X and Y directions. We can get it to be on grid. We can also get it to go down and then across. For example, if we're doing walls, we'll probably want them listed down the page in columns going across the sheet rather than across the sheet and then down in rows. We can specify what sheet size we're actually going to put this thing on. Additionally, we can get it to wrap text, dimension the item, and if we're dimensioning the item, then we can specify offsets and dimension styles. So let's now have a look at how we create our initial template view. You can see here that we've got doors template. So one of the things we have to do is actually include template as part of the name. Okay, so let's right click on legends and say new legend, and we'll call it doors new template, and we'll specify what scale we want, so we'll say 1 to 50. Alright, we've now got a blank view. The only things that we need to create in this view is a single piece of text and a single legend item. So we'll go down here to doors and we'll just drag that item onto the sheet and we'll say we want a front elevation. We could include a plan view of the item as well, or as an alternative. However, in this case we'll just go with the elevation. It's best generally to pick an item which is about as large as it's going to get. So this might be our largest door. So next we just want to place a piece of text, and we can decide where that piece of text would go. But I think in this case it's reasonable to just place it down here, and we'll just say sample text. because we don't actually need anything more than that to define what we want. So we've now said that we're looking at an elevation view of a legend item, and we're also using text beneath the item and of a particular size and style. Okay, so now we'll go into our legend command again, and let's say we'll create a new legend template. So this defines all the settings that will be used for a new item, and we'll just call it doors new. Okay, it's just creating that item. We can now set the values that we want for that. So we'll say it should use doors new template. The category is of course doors, but we can pick any of these items from the pull down. And we can say what parameter we want it sorted by. So we've got width, but we could do height or name or family name. We'll leave it on width for the moment. We can also go into parameters and decide what parameters we actually want being reported on. So we've got our list of parameters down here, and in the example that we showed at the start, we used the marks parameter to include all of the marks that a particular door might have. So we can transfer parameters back and forth between these two items. We can specify a prefix. So this prefix will actually appear in the text for the item. So if I go in here and modify that to my family, that will now appear as the prefix for the item. We can have a suffix. We can separate items by a tab or a carriage return line feed. If the item is a width or height, then we can also use specify the number of decimal places. So you can see here we've got 900.00, 2100.00. So let's just go OK. We're now back to this. At this point, we could also apply a filter. So say, for example, we only wanted items where the type name includes internal. So we'd go into filter, and we'd just say type name, and we've got a range of items here. In this case, we'll use contains, and we'll just say internal. And you'll see here we've got a preview of what the filter actually looks like. So we'll say OK. Alright, and at this point we can probably simply say create. So create will now gather information and work out the size of legend items based on the text that we're using. So when we use marks, it actually works a fair bit harder. So we'll just let this process, and I'll come back shortly. Okay, so it's now finished processing, and you can see that 18 items have been placed, and it's giving us a figure that the optimal grid spacing is 4600. That figure would ensure that all items have sufficient room to be placed accurately and regularly in this particular view. So it's worth noting that because we applied a filter, only doors with a type of internal somewhere in their name have appeared here. Our dimensions have been applied to all the items, and dimensions always look for the length and width parameters for an item. So it tries and finds matching line work within those families to then create those length and width dimensions. Now, the page width and page height that have been used are these values. However, we can see here that we've got our BDP A3 title block. Let's say we selected that particular one. You can see now that those figures here in the width height have updated. If we go back to the A3, we can then right click on this item and say copy to page width height. So those figures have now been updated, and we can hit create again. I should point out at this point that the difference between create or recreate will actually go through and crunch everything again. With the update command, it will only update notes, i.e. the text beneath items. So if some aspect had changed, perhaps the marks where the door was used, the update command would update that text. So we'll just hit create and let it reprocess, and you'll get a message just saying, do you wish to regenerate this template? So we say yes, and once again I'll just come back in a minute or two. Okay, so it's placed 18 items again. Our optimal grid spacing is still 4600, and in this case you'll see that we have just apparently a single item on this page. That's because we've in fact had a completely new template item created, in fact a number of them. So all of these will now fit onto our A3 pages. So here's our first sheet, our second sheet, and our third sheet. As you can see, ARLegend has automatically worked out how many items can go on a page. It's worked out how big the text is, depending on what you've chosen. So it actually calculates that and ensures that items will in fact fit on a page with the text that you've specified. Now, it's worth noting that some of these items are basically spaced to keep each item apart from the next. Sometimes you may in fact want to have everything what's known as on grid. So we'll go back to our legend dialog and show how you could do that. And in this case, we'll tick the on grid option. Let's just set our item gap there to 100, and we'll say the spacing in X is our 4600. So that should fit all items in a regular pattern. So we'll just hit create, and we'll come back soon. So you can now see that our items fit much better onto a page, and if I do a dimension from there to there, you can see that it's dimensioned at 4600. So our items are now all on that grid with a spacing of 4600. The Y distance will still be a random amount, which allows for the text and the height of items. Also now, two of our templates have become irrelevant. So template 3 and template 2, which were created from a previous run, are now obsolete. As you can see, this item actually appears on template 1. So we can simply get rid of that item and that item. So let's just tile it again, zoom everything. So may take a little bit of time to get your head around all those figures, but let's just go back into the dialog. The things to keep in mind are the page width and height, and you can get those values from any one of the sheets built in. And please note that if you set your sheets up properly with specific ARUtils parameters, which is the X clear, Y clear, X border, Y border, documented elsewhere, you will get very accurate readings about the clear area on your sheets. So that's quite an important thing. So if we now go to BDP A1, we get those figures. We can say copy to page width height. If we ran that again by simply hitting create, so we now have all of our doors on a single sheet using that internal filter, and this view is no longer necessary, and our door schedule is all good to go. Now the last thing to point out is that if we changed some aspect of one of these, perhaps we had the marks category involved, we could in fact just use the update option to update the text within those particular notes relating to each legend item. So for our last example, we'll just use a walls legend. So you can see the template view names changed, the categories changed, the parameters, let's just check to see what parameters we're reporting on. So we've got family name, name, width, and count. So how many times those particular walls are used. So we're sorting walls by width. So perhaps we'll say by name. Alright, we want it on an A3 sheet, and the figures are all good there. We've got our gaps set. We're going for on grid and down then across, so we'll be running down the page in columns. And our grid spacing in the Y direction will be 700. Spacing across the page will be determined automatically. Now, I could include dimensions, but we'll probably find that they tend to get a bit overlapped when all the layers of the walls are being dimensioned. So we'll turn that off in this case, and we'll just hit create and be back in a moment. Okay, so 23 legend items have been placed. We've got an optimal grid spacing of 1100. And if we zoom in on this, you can see now that we've got all of our walls placed on a sheet, showing what the layers are. Layers is an option that you can use within the walls. So if we quickly did that, legend, select our parameters, and down here we'll have layers. Alright, and we'll go OK, and hit create, and we'll be back in a moment. Okay, so we've now finished running the command, and you'll see that we actually have the layers showing for each wall item. So we know exactly what's in each layer, what the thickness is, and we have much more detailed information. So that concludes the presentation on ARLegend. As you can see, it's quite a powerful tool, and once you get it set up exactly the way that you want, you can have very repeatable processes and wall schedules, door schedules that meet your needs. Thank you very much.